And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, Georgia is at a critical crossroads as protests erupt nationwide following the government's decision to delay EU membership talks until 2028. With widespread dissent, allegations of state repression, and concerns over closer ties with Russia, the nation faces a pivotal moment in its democratic journey. Joining us today on TVP World to provide insight into these developments is George Mchedlishvili, Associate Professor at European University in Tbilisi. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good afternoon.
We've been following on the protests for the past couple of days now, and we're starting to slowly get a grasp of what is going on. But can you first help us understand what are some of the new developments overnight when it comes to these protests? Are we seeing it gain traction? Are we seeing more crackdowns, escalation? What's the situation like?
Okay, so this protest, as you know, started on Thursday. Yesterday we had the fifth night of the protest. So far they are slowly but surely intensifying. I mean, the numbers are, well, they used to be smaller. Now they reached to the tune of 200,000 people every night. So yesterday's night was unusual in the way that the crackdown and this forced selection of special police unit started earlier than usual at about 10:30 p.m. Usually it starts midnight. So it seems that we are going to the peak of the escalation. It seems that both sides are adamant, so they are not fighting so far. So it is a completely zero-sum game.
Right, so like I mentioned, perhaps it does seem like these protesters are not backing down, and it's even slowly gaining traction. There's been criticism from the government side that are accusing these protests of being kind of staged or more astroturfed from any sort of foreign influence instead of a grassroots movement. If you observe the current traction that it is getting and is still growing strong fifth day in, do you think that this is more of a pattern of a more grassroots movement, or are there any validity in the criticism that perhaps there's some sort of backing?
This movement is entirely grassroots. It is bottom-up. It is the protest of the society. It has very little to do with political parties or the political situation in Georgia. Yes, it's about political situation, but it's not party politics. So the people they felt slapped in the face on Thursday when the government announced that it suspends talk with the European Union, something which is very dear to every Georgian and something that is enshrined into the constitution of Georgia. So that's why it is entirely grassroots. And, well, again, there is no evidence of, I haven't noticed, and neither have other people noticed, that it is inspired from outside Georgia, or there is some other, meaningful support, tangible support. Of course, there is a moral support on the part of maybe European countries, European institutions, United States, but it doesn't go beyond that. Well, and generally we can pass a judgment about that movement being grassroots because the wave of the protest following the contested elections was basically over. And then, as a bolt from the blue, because of that decision, the protest renewed with a new vigor.
And when it comes to the side of the government, the side of the police that's cracking down on these protesters, there's also speculation of where they're coming from, what are their intentions, who's really driving them. Who do we see involved right now? Are they just the riot police, or do you expect the army to even get involved?
So far, it was not involved. It hasn't been involved, but again, we cannot say what will happen tomorrow because it seems, again, that's my perception, so it might be true, but judging by the numbers and how crowded this streets seem, so we are still actually kind of on the uptick, on the upswing of the protest. We haven't reached the potential peak. So far it has been riot police, but it's difficult to identify because those are special units without actually kind of any markings, without any identification signs. So it's difficult to say who they are. But officially, army hasn't been involved so far.
How that developed. Now, going into the more political front, though, we do know that the President Mchedlishvili has criticized the government's decision and highlighted these police brutality that we've been seeing. What does this reveal about the political divide in the country where the President and the Prime Minister are at such crossroads?
But yeah, they are at loggerheads on many counts and for more than 1 year, for multiple years, for different reasons. Well, and I guess the brutality of the first or second night was the cause of people being adamant and defiant, because probably because the country has accumulated significant experience of public protests at street rallies over the past few years. Usually they subside after reaching the peak pretty soon, but the way and I would say it wouldn't be a resolution, but it's a kind of the sheer brutality of the special units that they were exhibiting on the second night probably inspired more people to join, because kind of they felt like it's like adding insult to injury.
Right. The more they crack down on the civilian population, I think the more unjust that people think it is. Now, looking at the current government, the Georgian Dream Party, they have actually claimed that they are still committed to European integration. How credible is that claim?
Well, after the decision of November 28th, I guess, so now there is a questions regarding that. Until recently, there was little doubt. Yes, there were some misunderstandings between Georgia and the European bureaucrats, members of the European Parliament. And again, here, well, I guess it merits another longer discussion. So here I would kind of redistribute the responsibility for that role, because sometimes I believe kind of European members of the European Parliament were making excessive, I would say, accusations and holding Georgia to a more stringent standards than some other countries, some other candidate members. But so that said, today, obviously, there is a significant question because, well, there could be the road could be bumpy. There could be halts on the road on that path. But so that decision, it's pretty much puts on hold for 4 years the path of the European Union. And again, it was made without any significant reason. Yes, it was the resolution of the European Parliament. Some entries of the resolution are questionable. I believe some of them are not very judicious, not very wisely drafted. Well, but obviously that is not the cause to stop talks.
All right, very good point. Now, a lot of the international community is wondering what role does Russia play in this political crisis. Do you think there's fears of increasing Russian influence? Do you think that these fears are justified?
Well, Russian influence has been present in Georgia, for 35 years since our independence. Sometimes it's very painfully, in 2008. In this situation, I guess Russia acts like a spoiler because, their accusations, kind of the Russian leadership is siding completely with the Georgian Dream. But, all these statements, like Putin's statements or Medvedev's statement, they perfectly understand it, that it plays against the incumbents, against the Georgian Dream. So I believe Russia plays a spoiler in a way that it wants to present itself more influential than it really is, because sometimes perceptions matter more than reality. Russia's influence is very weak in Georgia for several reasons. First of all, Russia is bogged down in Ukraine for almost 3 years. And secondly, Georgia has experienced firsthand what actually Ukraine has been experiencing over the past 3 years, because the war of 2008, maybe it has on a smaller scale, and also Russia was supporting separatist movement. Therefore, Russian traction is minimal because there's virtually no family who hasn't suffered from direct Russian perfidy starting from 1992.
And when it comes to the European Union, how do you think that they might respond to the current crisis? Especially, we already see calls for sanctions against Georgian officials. Do you think that will be enough to kind of hold back some of its actions?
Well, some sanctions are already in place because Baltic states like Poland started to reduce sanctions against some top authorities of the Georgian leadership, including de facto leader Bidzina Ivanishvili. Obviously, that's not going to be the game changer in this round of standoff. So between the demonstrators, between the people at the rallies and the government. But I still believe, I hope I'm not overly optimistic in this regard, that there is still a space for compromise, for negotiations. The will to join the European Union to become a bona fide, truly European country is the will of 80+% of Georgian citizens. And by the way, the article in the Constitution, this Article 78, was introduced by the incumbents, by the Georgian Dream themselves, in 2014. So they actually reneged on their own promises, on their own policies, and therefore, I guess there is a space, there is a case for them to back down and expect some more positive and milder moves on the part of European Union.
Right. Hopefully that does unfold in the way that it does. So thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.